So before I start, I would like to give a thank you for all of the fun feedback I got on my video about how Yu-Gi-Oh! GX is objectively the best Yu-Gi-Oh! Series. Things have been a little rough in general the past couple weeks, but one thing that always put a smile on my face was the increasingly defensive comments I would get on that video. Like, I didn't really read them because I said I wouldn't, but every time I thought I had seen the longest, most defensive comment, an even longer one would show up, and it always gave me a chuckle. So if at any point your opinions are feeling threatened by my funny words, well, this is how long the longest comment on my previous video was. Please make yours longer for my amusement. I'm still not going to read it though, because being a Yu-Gi-Oh! GX fan made me illiterate. And to all the 5Ds fanboys out there who feel the need to own me for whatever reason, just always remember we all have bad taste here on the basis of being Yu-Gi-Oh! Fans. And it's just a race to the bottom, so don't waste your effort. Anyway, I know at the end of my last video, I said I was interested in doing my spiel about what a tragic figure Kaiba is. And I did. Unfortunately, I think that video has an ancient Egyptian curse on it. I recorded that video twice, I swear, and the first time there was just a ton of background noise and I was super distracted and it was just an incomprehensible mess. And then the second time, my recording software decided to just mangle the fuck out of that footage. And by the time I had managed to salvage it so that I was able to edit it, I was just completely over the whole thing. And I've decided to trash it and maybe try again later. Maybe. But I did still want to make a video because there is a little bit of fun to be had here. So I decided to just cover a different topic instead. I feel like maybe my last video, even if it was, in jest, brought a bit of a spicy take to the table. So I decided to approach this video with the coldest take possible. Yu-Gi-Oh! Arc 5 is bad, and I think less people would be offended by my use of the word objective this time. When I say Arc 5 is probably objectively the worst Yu-Gi-Oh! Series. Even if you love Arc 5, you hate Arc 5. And I know, because I fucking loved Arc 5. I mentioned in my last video that I stopped following Yu-Gi-Oh! That closely after GX, but then I went on to get really deep back into it around the time I was in college. And that was around the time that Arc 5 had just started, so I fell kind of headfirst into that one for good reason. And I was super into it. I watched it weekly as it aired. I even stayed up a couple of times until 4 a.m. to watch it live, and I drew a ton of fan art, and I actually had a very extensive college AU comic that I worked on for months. And even my Twitter header is a screenshot of yugioh because I just fucking loved him, and it's still that to this day, 5 years later, just because I'm so attached to it. So I'm allowed to say that Arc 5 fucking sucks. I've earned that. So I figured today we could just sit down and talk about why Arc 5 sucked. So just your general rundown of disclaimers. I will be spoiling Arc 5, and chances are you don't care. Either you've already seen Arc 5 and you get what I'm saying, or you're never going to watch Arc 5 and nothing of value will be lost by just listening to me explain what happens to you. So, but just in case, if you do care about watching Yu-Gi-Oh! Arc 5, which frankly I wouldn't recommend past season 1, just so you know, gonna spoil it as usual. And sorry as usual about any background noise. I don't really pick a lot of it up on my microphone, but just hearing anything tends to spook me because I have the disposition of a frightened rabbit. So hopefully there won't be a lot of that this time. We'll see. So to start off, I'm gonna explain the overall premise of Yu-Gi-Oh! Arc 5 for anyone who needs a recap or is not familiar. Surprisingly enough, there are people who watch my videos that aren't Yu-Gi-Oh! People. I see you. I love you. And you're probably like, what the fuck is Yu-Gi-Oh! Arc 5? I've never heard of that. And yeah, there's a reason for that. Yu-Gi-Oh! Arc 5 is the 5th Yu-Gi-Oh! Series, hence the name. It aired between like 2014 and I want to say 2017. So it's pretty recent. Like by the time it aired, Yu-Gi-Oh! The anime has completely waned in the mainstream. The English dubs don't get a lot of distribution anymore. So unless you really have Yu-Gi-Oh! On your radar, you probably missed Arc 5. But again, nothing of value lost. So in my last video, I described Yu-Gi-Oh! Arc 5 as Yu-Gi-Oh! Civil War, what if every Yu-Gi-Oh! Series fought behind a Denny's? And that's basically what it is. But I will go more into depth for your benefit. You're welcome. So Yu-Gi-Oh! Arc 5 is about Yuya, who's like a fun, cool guy, fun boy duelist, and also like a drama kid. And Yuya's whole thing is that he wants to be like a great entertainment duelist, like his absent father. He's not very serious and he really just cares about making people smile. And in the opening duel of the series, Yuya somehow manifests the power to create a new form of monster summoning, like a new game mechanic for duel monsters called pendulum summon. And he just does this out of the blue and no one knows what it is. And they're like, this seems kind of broken, but now it's a game mechanic. And admittedly, I still don't understand pendulum summon. It does seem kind of broken, but I'm sure it's fine, if not now irrelevant. I don't pay attention to the meta. Do not at me. So the way we think the series is going to go at this point is like, oh, it's this weird kind of Yu-Gi-Oh! Cirque du Soleil type of thing with Yuya the clown boy and his best female friend Yuzu going to duel school. And there's these little kids that are also in the duel school and they're just there. And there's this rival school called Leo Duel School with this Kaiba-esque figure, Reiji. And what's going on there? I guess they're rivals. And precious clown boy Yuya has to discover how to control this new summoning method he spontaneously brought into existence. So that'll be fun. But then we end up going in a completely different direction pretty quickly. So like less than 10 episodes into the series, something weird happens where this masked emo kid shows up and he runs into aforementioned female friend Yuzu. And he mistakes her for this other girl named Ruri. And Yuzu's like, no. And Yuzu's dueling this guy. So the masked guy takes over the fight for her because he, sees her in trouble. And he's like, And he totally destroys the guy, just wins the fuck out of that duel. And then his mask falls off. And Yuzu's like, wait, Yuya? He doesn't look anything like Yuya, and he doesn't act like Yuya. He doesn't even talk like Yuya, but they have like an identical face. So everyone just immediately thinks this is Yuya. But then Yuya actually shows up, and as he does, the other guy just magically teleports away, and it's like he wasn't even there. And everyone's just really confused because who the fuck is this guy that looks like Yuya? That's not Yuya. What's going on? And there's this other overly aggressive emo kid named Shun who also shows up and is also confusing Yuzu for Ruri. And everyone is just confused about each other's identities and it's kind of not clear what's going on. Oh, and one thing about the setting I forgot to mention is that in this universe, in this setting, it's considered really unusual for people to specialize in, different methods of special summon. So like fusion, synchro, Xyz, that's just kind of weird to know even one of them. Like you have to study it and it's considered unusual and a big deal. Like maybe I mean, I'm not going to sit here and pretend I really actually understand all the different summoning methods. They do become kind of confusing to me. Please don't judge me. But it's just kind of like there's a certain weight to it. So even though we start off with a very cheery setting for Arc 5, especially if you're like a longtime Yu-Gi-Oh fan, which let's be real, you probably are if you're sitting down to watch Arc 5, there are these little oddities in the setting that kind of tick you off that something's not quite right, maybe. There's just this air of mystery to the beginning of Arc 5 that is, I think, really interesting, and it kind of sucks you in because you're just like, who the hell are these guys? Why is everything like a little bit weird? And that's cool. So as season 1 goes on, we learn that the emo Yuya is actually named Yuto, and he's actually from a different dimension, the Xyz dimension, which is now a war-torn wasteland because it was attacked by fusion users from the fusion dimension. We got parallel dimensions. So it turns out there's 4 different dimensions, each one kind of centered around a different summoning method. So there's a fusion dimension, there's an Xyz dimension, there's a synchro dimension, and then Yuya's dimension is standard. And by extension, each dimension represents a previous Yu-Gi-Oh series. So for example, the synchro dimension is literally just Yu-Gi-Oh 5Ds. So that's wild. And so the GX fusion dimension is actually waging war on the other dimensions. And they've already absolutely fucked up the Zexal dimension, and they are coming for the other two. It's just a little bit funny, but also like, that's a big plot. So each dimension has its own version of Yuya. So we have Yuto from Xyz, but we also have Yugo from Synchro and Yuri from Fusion. And there's also a version of Yuzu in every dimension. There's just a lot of elements in play here. So the plot of Arc 5 is to stop the Fusion dimension from raging war and destroying every other dimension, but also to unravel the mystery around why there's these weird things happening focused on Yuya and Yuzu. And this is accomplished by traveling to the other dimensions, taking part in card games, and helping the people there in order to help the greater cause of stopping an interdimensional war. And like, that's a cool setup. Like, it's really good. And probably one of the things I found really cool about Arc 5 in comparison to other Yu-Gi-Oh series is that each season doesn't feel super self-contained, which maybe in the end this becomes a weakness of the show. But at the end of a season, you know, it's not, okay, cool, we won the tournament, great, and we have resolved the conflict of this season and we have defeated the villain. Like, Yu-Gi-Oh! Arc 5 still has that, it's just less so. Each season has its own villain, but there's really like one overarching villain for most of it. It's just, and the plot just is ongoing between each season. They're just kind of changing location and focus. So I thought that was cool. I thought it was cool until it wasn't. But I guess the point of this bit is that Yu-Gi-Oh! Arc 5 has one of the most interesting setups, I think. It's mysterious, but it's still incredibly entertaining, and, you know, I liked what we were given. So what went wrong? I have some theories. So first thing, too many characters, way too many characters. Jesus Christ. You know, I kind of mentioned offhand in my GX video that I thought GX handled its cast well. Basically, GX has a pretty big cast. I mean, all the Yu-Gi-Oh series do. But, you know, for this example, we'll just say GX. It handled the balance of those characters well. You know, between seasons, characters would be leaving and then new ones would come in. And sometimes we'd meet a character once and then they would come back later. Or, you know, we'd start off with this character and then they'd leave, and then they would come back later for like a one shot. And it just wasn't super oversaturated with like every time that there's a new thing, there's a new character. It tend to cycle them in and out decently well. Well, Arc 5 does not do that. Not one bit. I mean, the way the series is set up, I don't think it could, but it is just a lot. Literally every season, you get a whole entire new cast of characters on top of the characters that we already have and on top of the main cast. And it's just frustrating. Like by the time we're in season 2, there are anywhere between 10 and 20 like characters in play in any given episode. And it's just a lot. That's just a setup for unsatisfying writing. And for people who aren't familiar with Arc 5, it's basically like this. You got your main character, you got Yugi, but instead of just Yami Yugi, there's like 3 Yami Yugis, and each of them have their own backstory in life outside of Yugi. And then you have Taya, but there's also 3 different versions of Taya, and they individually have relationships to their corresponding Yugi. Hell, one of them is the sister of one of the Yugi's best friends, which is needlessly complicated and not as developed as I would have liked. But don't worry, Yugi still has his own best friend and an absent father who is weirdly omnipresent in this entire series despite not actually being around for most of it. We got Taya's father in there as well. We got these 3 kids who are always hanging around. Oh, and we do have a Kaiba character and a Mokuba, but the Mokuba is like sad and has a ninja caretaker. Isn't that great? And we have this like cheesy Duke Devlin guy who was a lot of fun and like one of the better characters, but like he's just part of the friend group too. He's just always there. And then we just have Bakura, but a baby. And then we have like a second Bakura, but he's much more charismatic. And that's just the main crew. So you know how in Yu-Gi-Oh! There are these kind of secondary characters who we meet several times and they're a little bit beloved, like Mai and Rex Raptor and Weevil and Mako and all of them. And, you know, they come back. We get those in Arc 5, except because we're changing dimensions every season, we have to change out that cast every season. So we'll meet characters in season 1, like we'll meet Mai and Mako and Rex, but instead of them continuing on and having full character arcs, they'll have like half of a character arc in season 1, and then we'll never see them again because we have to bring in new characters in season 2 to have their own character arcs. So that's great. Oh yeah. And remember how I said that each dimension represents a different Yu-Gi-Oh series essentially? Well, they bring back characters from those series. And admittedly, I really enjoy that to a degree. Like around the time season 2 started, I was 21, and despite that, the awe and wonder I felt when they announced that Crow and Jack from 5Ds were going to be characters in Arc 5 was childlike. It blew my mind. But yeah, so we have these legacy characters who are also characters, and because they're characters that we're already familiar with, they do kind of carry a bit more weight than some of the actual Arc 5 characters. So they're here now too, and they bring their own little posse with them. So we get like 2 legacy characters per season, and they just have their own shit going on. And I didn't even mention there's like a big bad villain, Leo Akaba, and so he's off doing his shit. And there's like a mini boss in every season. So you got like the French guy and his stupid robot, and there's just so many characters. I assume once I'm editing this, I will just plop all of these examples on the screen. Can you even see me anymore? And again, the plot of Arc 5 is so big, the way that they introduce it. Like it has so many moving parts, and it just does not help that there are a million fucking characters at any given point. And a lot of these characters aren't even on the same page, really, because like Yuya and his crew have the pretty straightforward mission of like, we need to stop this war, we need to save our friends who have, you know, been separated from us. We're gonna do this. They'll run into these other characters in the other dimensions who are just dealing with their own problems. Like they'll go to 5Ds, and most of the characters in the 5Ds dimension will be like, that's great, but we have a lot of social economic problems that we're trying to solve, so we're going to do that instead. And it's just like trying to balance more things. And by the time they make it to the sexual dimension, that's just a war-torn world now, and they have their own things they need to worry about, like surviving, and they can't necessarily focus on, you know, trying to find specific people or fight back. It's just no one's on the same page, and that just makes it frustrating. There's so many wild card characters just acting on their own in Arc 5 that all it does is constantly derail the plot that we are rooting for. For an example of your typical Arc 5 character, I am obligated to talk about Shinji Weber. It's said that every Yu-Gi-Oh fan has like their favorite main characters, but they also have these side characters that they're hopelessly obsessed with. Well, Shinji is my side character who I'm hopelessly obsessed with, and I'm not proud of that. So when Yuya and his friends arrive in the Synchro dimension, the Synchro 5Ds dimension, they almost immediately get stopped by the police because it's 5Ds, and as we know, 5D is all about motorcycles and themes of class divide. And if you aren't wealthy in the 5Ds dimension, you're just going to be immediately harassed by the police and arrested. So exactly that happens. And before Yuya and his friends can be arrested, Crow and his gang show up and rescue them. So Shinji Weber is Crow's friend and a part of his little gang. And in the dub, it's kind of accidentally implied that he is Crow's live-in boyfriend, and I physically can't stop myself from mentioning that. And he's not even like a very nice person. He is immediately wary of Yuya, despite Yuya being a child. And he is very world weary, and he is very outspoken of his hatred of the upper class in the synchro dimension and in general. So later on in the season, everyone gets invited to take part in this very superficial duel tournament. Like the point of the tournament is to show unity and friendship between the rich upper class and the lower class, which is most of the population, who are forced to live in slums and are subjected to police brutality constantly and go to prison to do labor. And Yuya and his friends are basically like, this is a little stupid, but it's an important step to be able to inform everyone about what's happening with this interdimensional war. And I can find Yuzu, who has been missing for a while. And Shinji's like, I understand that this interdimensional war is kind of a huge deal, but like, I've been given a platform and the revolution needs to be televised. So like Shinji isn't set up as a very helpful ally, but like he takes this opportunity to be as unhelpful as possible and completely derails the entire intergalactic war in order to promote his own political views in front of everyone. And like, we love to see it. We love an activist, but also this is just a show with a plot, and he's derailing the plot. So not only does Shinji begin to sow unrest into the population of this city, but he also like makes Yuya look really bad. Like he makes Yuya look like a bootlicker in front of everyone. So that's not helping Yuya's cause at all. And then Shinji eventually causes a violent riot which just makes things even more complicated as the fusion dimension kind of draws near. And then after that, he just kind of watches Yuya do his final duel, and he's like, maybe Yuya's not that bad. And that's it. That's what Shinji contributed to the show. And I just have to wonder, was it necessary? And why am I so thirsty for this guy despite all of this? And like a lot of characters in Arc 5 are like that. Everyone has these underlying motives where they just take the first chance they can to ignore the fact that there is a plot we're trying to focus on and make it about themselves, which would be cool if it weren't really frustrating to watch for the audience. And again, because there's so many characters, a lot of them don't really get fleshed out super well, which leads to my next point of wasted potential. Arc 5 is the mecca of wasted potential. To make this about Yu-Gi-Oh! GX again, because I always will, a lot of people will criticize GX for its wasted potential in characters, in plot lines, etc. I'm just saying people who think that Yu-Gi-Oh! GX is the worst offender of that haven't spent enough time emotionally invested in Arc 5. Arc 5 has a really interesting cast of characters. It has a very unique and interesting setup. It has so much going for it. But I think at the end of the day, the biggest downfall of Arc 5 is that it's just too big and it cannot follow through on that. It is so oversaturated with characters that a lot of important characters don't really get fleshed out at all, or have to halt their development mid-show to just play a different role or do nothing because there's too many characters and they can't all be doing things. That would just be confusing, and we wouldn't want that. I think the saddest example in Arc 5 are Yuzu and her counterparts, aka the Bracelet Girls. They are such a key element of the whole series, and yet they get no payoff, and it's so sad. Yuzu had everything going for her to be like a really great Yu-Gi-Oh! Girl. Like, she is a bit of a standard shonen, female best friend where she is a little bit at odds with Yuya at all times, and maybe there's something more there, but we're not going to talk about that because it's Yu-Gi-Oh! And we don't commit to our romantic plot lines unless it's with a bi-gender dragon or a tiger or something. But she's also a really driven character. Outside of being friends with Yuya, she has a lot of agency to grow as a person on her own, and she works hard to do that in season 1. And she's confident, and she also wants to be a great duel entertainer, and she kind of is. People love to watch her duel, and people like her, and she can hold her own, and she's just good. And the other Bracelet Girl that we get to spend a significant amount of time with is Serena, who is the fusion counterpart. And I fucking adore Serena. Just like, yeah, it's a bit of projection, but she definitely falls under this type of character that I absolutely adore, which is just like socially awkward baby lesbian who wants to fight everyone. Like, she didn't have any friends growing up. She was raised in a pretty hostile environment to be a child soldier. So when she's out and about, she kind of doesn't know how to behave around people, and she's just angry all the time. But as we spend more time with her, we kind of see her, open up a little and be a little bit of a sweetheart. And I love her so much. And she's like strong and doesn't afraid of anything. And between her and Yuzu and like other characters who get axed pretty quickly, like Masami and like Yuya's mom, Arc 5 had a pretty decent female lineup, and that slaps. But once we get to like season 3, Yuzu and Serena basically lose all of their agency and just become hostages that need to be saved, and that fucking blows. And like the other two Bracelet Girls, Rin and Ruri, we really don't get to meet at all or really see them in action in earnest. By the time that they're in the show, like in person, not as flashbacks. They're already brainwashed by this guy, so they're not themselves, and it does not count. And we see a lot of Rin in flashbacks, so we get to see her and Yugioh spending a lot of time together and see their relationship in play. And it really just boils down to she is the mom friend. And I'm not saying that's not cute, but it's just not the most. And Ruri, despite being mentioned very early in the series and being a huge motivator for Shun and Yuto constantly, we really don't see anything out of her. Like, I think I could tell you the least about her character out of the four of them. She's nice, she's a nice girl. Like, we get to see her and Yuto in a few flashbacks interacting, and that's really sweet, but it's just, again, not the most that they could do. So, And yeah, by the last season, these four are basically reduced to non-characters. Like, it didn't matter that they were ever there at all. At this point, they're just essentially plot objects that, need to be figured out and taken away from the big bad guy. So that sucks. And like, they're probably the worst offenders to me personally, but a lot of the characters are like that. Even with the U boys, Yuya, the main character, and the 3 different skins of him, like, they're pretty disproportionately fleshed out too. Like, Yuya's the main character, so we kind of know what his deal is, but eventually he just becomes kind of a frustrating character because his whole point is he's like, wow, I just got to make everyone smile. I just got to smile through all my bullshit. And it's like, no, Yuya, that's a bad coping mechanism. And as the series progresses, like, he is so utterly fucked up by everything that he's having to deal with, which, is a lot. It's a lot for a kid. And that his entire character just becomes this mantra of like, everyone should just smile. And it's like, shut the fuck up, Yuya. Go to therapy. And then there's Yuto, who we meet first out of the 3 counterparts. And, we kind of get the gist of him, that he's like a sentimental emo boy who's just fighting for justice. But he's killed pretty quickly. That happens, by the way. But yeah, he's killed and he's absorbed by Yuya, like, before the first season is even over, and we like never get to hear from him again for a really long time. I think he finally is able to speak again in like season 3. And what does he have to offer at that point? He's dead, I guess. Yugioh is probably the counterpart that we spend the most time with outside of Yuya, and for that I am grateful because he is the best. Yugioh is my stupid son, my baby boy. Yugioh is the best counterpart and the strongest character simply for surviving as long as he did, given the circumstances. So, next. And then we have Yuri, who is like the evil one. And I think like anime Yuri has a lot of fans, like maybe on Tumblr and stuff. But I just never really found him that interesting. Like, we get bits and pieces of Yuri's personality and backstory, but I think at the end of the day, he's just cartoonishly evil and he likes plants. Gay icon. So the point is, the handling of the characters are pretty mixed. Some of them suck and some of them don't. And it's random what you'll get. And you better hope to God that you got emotionally attached to a character who's going to have a good run, like Yugioh or something, and not the 5 million others who get nothing. But I guess at the end of the day, it doesn't matter which character you latch onto. At the end of the series, all of it amounts to nothing. Like, I'll get into the end of the series later on, but, just to get this out of the way, almost all of the characters that I just talked about are dead. It never mattered because it's revealed that the U boys and the bracelet girls, they are not indeed real people. They are just fragments of the same one person from a previously unified universe. And they got split into four, and it didn't matter that they lived full lives and had full characters, because at the end of the day, they're just one fucking guy, and they cannot all live and exist, but not in like a meaningful way, in a fun way. Just liking anyone in Yu-Gi-Oh! Arc 5 is a miserable time. Just don't like anyone in Yu-Gi-Oh! Arc 5. You're gonna be unhappy. You know, just to circle back, Yu-Gi-Oh! Arc 5 has this air of conspiracy to it, of like, gosh, why are things this way? Why are there four universes? Why are there four Yuyas? Like, what does it all mean? What do the bracelets do? What is it? I just remember at the height of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Arc 5 fandom, it was just constant theorizing. You know, there are these subtle moments of like, oh shit, there's color coding in the openings, and there's actually a lot of color coding in Arc 5 that signify like, oh, this means this means this. And so people were starting to really pick apart, you know, visuals. You know, people were genuinely interested in what the answers to their questions were going to be. And I'm not saying that the answers we were given were unsatisfactory. They're, you know, you can't expect anything too deep at the end of the day from Yu-Gi-Oh! Arc 5, I suppose, but they weren't the best, and the way they were given to us just kind of fucking sucked. And I'm just gonna tangent a bit into like a little extra bullet point of why Arc 5 is disappointing. It's because it's confusing. Like Arc 5 takes up a lot of precious real estate in my brain, I'm sad to say, but it has been a while since I've really revisited it, so maybe I'm just forgetting details. And I will admit that I didn't watch a lot of like the last season and stuff, so maybe I've just missed the boat on some of this. But Arc 5, it's confusing. I think one of my favorite stupid things about Arc 5 is the mechanics of the U boys and the bracelet girls, because, you know, you got Yuya, Yuto, Yugo, and Yuri. If any two of them get too close to each other, they enter this primal berserk state where they just want to commit murder. They just want to destroy the nearest life, and they will fight the other U-boy on sight and try to kill him. But alternatively, they also have like weird powers that they can inflict upon each other, and they like kind of have to do with the fusioning method that each boy represents. Like Yuto can overlay Yuya and like essentially take over his body, and whereas Yugo can kind of synchronize with him and see what he's seeing. It's weird and confusing, and it's never like actually brought up. These are all just things that fans notice. Again, maybe they did bring it up. I don't fucking know. It's too confusing. And it's just like anytime any two of these boys get too close to each other, antics ensue, and it's kind of spooky at first, but after a while it just becomes a little comedic, just because it just keeps happening and no one knows what's going on. But like what's even funnier than that is the way that the bracelet girls function, because each girl has this bracelet. It's shown that Yuzu was actually born with this bracelet. She just had it as a baby. It boggles the mind. And they just always had this bracelet, and they never question why. But then once the U boys start, you know, crossing paths with each other, as long as one of the bracelet girls is nearby, her bracelet will automatically transport one of them away. And Yuzu might also go, depending on her proximity to said boy. And it is funny. Because like I said, when she first meets Yuto, she thinks it's Yuya, and then Yuya actually arrives and runs up to her, which causes Yuto to be teleported away. And so they like can never meet. And she's just like, and this mechanic comes into play constantly in the show, which ultimately becomes frustrating because by the time we get to the end of season 1, Yuzu is separated from the group and ends up with Yugo and is trying to find her way back to Yuya, but she can never really reunite with him because she's with Yugo, and every time the two get too close to each other, one of them ends up getting flung away. It becomes comedy, but it does become a bit frustrating because, like with the problem of having too many free agent characters, having too many magical mechanics, just distracts the plot and prolongs it forever. It just gets to the point where you're like, can I just understand? So what eventually gets revealed is that, the U boys are actually 4 parts of the same horrible boy, Zark, and all of the girls are the same girl, Ray, and like Zark was a bad boy and he turned into like this homicidal dragon and wreaked havoc on the unified dimension. So Ray did this thing with the bracelets to stop him, and then they each got split into 4 parts, mostly to keep Zark from wreaking more havoc, I guess. And then Ray is basically the defense mechanism against that to make sure that Zark can never get reunited into one bad boy. They reunite anyway because one of the 4 boys that Zark split into was a bad boy. And again, that's a satisfying answer, I think, but I don't know. Thinking about Arc 5 makes me tired. And then at the end of the series, when they re-defeat Zark, he gets reset as Yuya and only Yuya, but Yuzu is like gone, and then he realizes Yuzu is gone and he's like, that's not fucking right. He essentially has to do like a boss gauntlet of like dueling a bunch of people to make a baby smile, I think. So basically what had happened is Rei's spirit, which is Yuzu, got reincarnated as a baby, and that baby was Reiji's younger brother. That baby was like the Mokuba of the series, but now they're a baby and they have Rei's spirit in them, and by extension Yuzu. So Yuya has to do like this boss gauntlet of dueling a bunch of people again in order to make the baby smile. And if the baby smiles, Yuzu will come back. And I'm not saying there aren't really abstract plots in Yu-Gi-Oh! Like, that's just par for the course. But like, it just gets really weird. And there's so much that I haven't touched on. And there's so many characters I never even brought up. But yeah, Arc 5 just brings too much to the table. It overloaded the table, and now the table is broken and everything's on the floor, like in shambles, and it's a big mess. And we're just trying. And I like cannot imagine a world in which by the end of season 2, Arc 5 would have wrapped up in any satisfying way, just because the pacing is bad. But let's talk about the ending. The no good, horrible, terrible, awful ending. So admittedly, I've never watched the last episode of Arc 5 because I didn't bother staying up to watch it live, because at that point I was kind of over it. And by the time it would have been available for me to watch, I already knew how it ended, and I just like did not give a shit. So maybe I've missed the point. Tell me how much I've missed the point based on my recollection of the baby laughing subplot. Like, that's what I remember. So as we've established, by the end of Arc 5, Yuzu is gone. Yuya has to make this baby laugh in order to bring her back and bring smiles to the world and fix things, right? What does that even mean? Well, I guess that's what we find out at the end of the series, because Arc 5 ends with Yuya beating Reiji and making the baby laugh. And when the baby laughs, I hate the baby laughing plot. Also, this is such a bad anime baby. This baby haunts me. But he makes the baby laugh, and then Yuzu does indeed reappear in the stadium, and like everyone's watching. And when I say everyone, I mean everyone. Like Jack Atlas is there, Crow Hogan is there, Asuka Yugioh GX is there, Shun Kurosaki is there. Everyone's just kind of inexplicably there. I don't remember if Shinji was there. I do remember him actively being ignored at this point in the show, but it'd be kind of funny if Shinji was there. I guess I'll find out when I edit this. So Yuzu reappears and Yuya is there, and I forgot to mention that as Yuzu is dueling Reiji, he has like a talk actually with like Yugo and Yuto and Yuri, who like isn't evil anymore. The implication there being like they're in his brain now, baby. So we know the answer to what happened to them, but at the end of the series, Yuzu and Yuya see each other and they smile, and we get overlays of the U boys and then their corresponding U girls seeing each other and smile. U girls, you know what I mean? Like only Yuya and Yuzu survive. And to me, like the saddest part of the ending is Shun is right there, and Shun was like Yuto's best friend and Ruri's big brother. And he's just standing there like, I feel so bad for him. But yeah, so it just ends with all of them dying except for Yuya and Yuzu. And I just think that was the wrong choice. There's a lot of choices they could have made, and they made the worst one. I'm sorry. Like, just to indulge myself a little bit on like my fanfic ending for arc 5, I think a really good direction to have taken was for all of them to die. Like, fuck Yuya and Yuzu. Their characters were ruined by the end of the series anyway. I just thought it would have been like a really fun, almost Madoka-esque ending for all of them to die in order to reestablish the proper timeline of these universes, or to, unify the universe into the way it's supposed to be. Oh, also something I failed to mention earlier is that arc 5 just ruined the potential for a cohesive Yu-Gi-Oh timeline, because that alone is already kind of complicated and open to debate. But I think the common accepted Yu-Gi-Oh timeline looks something like this. But then Yu-Gi-Oh! Arc 5 happened. It created parallel timelines to events that were already previously established. It's weird and it makes me unhappy. And I thought it would have been really clever and good if at the end it was shown that the timelines were clarified and normalized. The series ends with, Sora at Duel Academy, and Shun is walking to school in Zexal era Heartland, and he feels kind of lonely for some reason, and he can't be sure why. And like Crow is living through the events of Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds as they played out like in canon, and he notices a bee amongst some garbage, and he gets kind of sad for a moment and he doesn't know why. I don't know why my Madoka ending also involves Shinji Weber not existing anymore, but I guess it does. But no, instead, it's never explained why there are alternate versions of, Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, where instead of Duel Academy being like a weird school that Kaiba helped fund, it's like a war academy, and Edo is like a war general, and Asuka like defected for sapphic reasons. But no, that would have been a little bit clever, I suppose. So that's not what we got. I think the only other really satisfying ending would have been for all of them to live. Because like I said before, all of the U boys and Bracelet girls have backstories and lived full lives prior to the events of Yu-Gi-Oh! Arc 5. And it's just incredibly disappointing that they essentially got reduced to like, JK, they're just these characters again. And it doesn't matter that they had lives. Now they're just trapped forever in the confines of these two characters' bodies. Isn't that great? And I definitely think that Arc 5 had a troubled production. Like, I do not keep up with the production woes of Yu-Gi-Oh! That, obviously exist. So I cannot remember what the climate of the production at the studio was during arc 5. Like, I don't think we were at the point of Reigns where there were just constant recap episodes. So I don't think it was that bad, but something must have gone wrong because I feel like Yu-Gi-Oh! Arc 5 was not planned out very well. We spent a full season in Yu-Gi-Oh! 5D's dimension, but we spent like 5 episodes in the Zexal dimension, and then once we get to the GX dimension, it's just kind of like confusing and a lot of things are happening and it's weird. I don't know what went wrong in the production of Arc 5 that they just kind of had to end it as weirdly as possible, but it happened, I suppose. So I think that's the biggest thing Arc 5 has against it. Even if you're like me and you really tried watching it to the end, I don't think there's a person on this planet who watched Arc 5 who watched the ending and went, wow. And like, I hate having things explained to me, but if you do know what the deal was with the production of Arc 5, feel free to refresh me in the comments down below because, again, I don't research. I'm just here to pass the time by making passable content. So if you know better than me, this one time, you may correct me once. But yeah, in a perfect world, Arc 5 would have had a thoughtful, well-paced ending, but it didn't, and that's the world we're in. What a great world it is. And just to end things off, I'd be remiss not to talk at least a little bit about the Arc 5 manga, because that's something. I haven't read all of the Yu-Gi-Oh mangas. In fact, I've really only read the original and the GX manga. But yeah, to my knowledge, I feel like Yu-Gi-Oh! Arc 5 is the manga that strays the most from the anime, which is very fascinating to me. The Yu-Gi-Oh! Arc 5 manga basically cuts most of the cast, which, no complaints there, honestly. And then it just takes a few of the characters and puts them in a completely different setting and story. So the premise of the manga is basically Yuya is a wanted time travel criminal. The premise of the manga is equally confusing, but the important takeaway of the manga is that Yuya and the other counterparts are no longer separate people. They are alternate personalities of the same body, which is a really exciting premise to me. It is eventually revealed that they are actually brothers in this manga, and they just got caught up in this weird time travel dimension anomaly thing and became part of Yuya's consciousness because they died in said anomaly. But yeah, that's a very cute detail. And the Arc 5 manga has a lot of flaws, namely how it treats Yuzu, who at this point is the only female character in this story. Like, it's not the worst. And I've been a bit shy about expressing my opinions, but I don't hate the ending just because it is so bonkers that I can't help but be amused. So throughout the manga, all of the different Yu counterparts are interacting with Yuzu. And there are points in the series where, Yugioh or one of them will be like, wait a second, she looks familiar. And they'll just be like, wave it off. Initially, I was like, okay, are they going to bring in Yuzu's counterparts? But the twist ending of the Arc 5 manga, because this is a time travel manga, Yuya is actually from like 20 or so years in the future and he got stuck in the past or something. It gets confusing. But the twist ending of the Arc 5 manga is after Yuya returns to the future, Yuzu is kind of reminiscing over their time together and she stumbles upon young Yugioh, who is Yuya's dad. And the implication there is that they go on to fall in love and birth all 4 of the Yu boys. In the manga, Yuzu is Yuya's mom. I already forgot if I said it was implied, but it is confirmed in like a follow-up 3-page thing that Yuzu is indeed all 4 of their moms. And it's, I can't even complain at this point. Like, What a twist. A ton of people hated that ending because of, you know, the overall way that Yuzu was treated in that manga, and like they're right to do so, but I just I don't know which ending is worse. So when it comes to Arc 5 media, I just kind of accept what I'm given and go, that's crazy. The Arc 5 manga, kind of a mess, but it does bring something to the table if you were already a fan of Arc 5, because the U boys are, you know, co-inhabiting a body and working together. You get to see a lot more of their personalities, and like none of them are really villainized. Like Yuri is just, you know, instead of being a flamboyant villain, he's just a flamboyant, smug little prick, and I find that really endearing. And Yuto especially, his manga personality is just so cute. It scratches an itch that I had. So it has its moments, but as a whole, I don't know what to tell you. It is what it is. but but yeah, that's kind of my overview of Yu-Gi-Oh! Arc 5 and why it disappointed me. Yu-Gi-Oh! Arc 5 is kind of like my personal demon. I'm so betrayed by it, but I also still have a lot of love for it in my heart. So I'm just living in misery and I'm never going to be happy again. But yeah, I think I'll just end it here. I feel like I'm getting kind of dehydrated. I get really into talking about Yu-Gi-Oh! Arc 5. It's maybe someday if the witch who I apparently cross paths with changes her mind about my ability to make that Kaiba rant, I'll do that. I did like take notes for that and everything, so it would be nice to follow up on that, but I just can't deal with it emotionally right now. So feel free to clap for me in the comments if you think that's worth trying again. Clap if you believe in me. Or, you know, just continue to be weirdly judgmental about my opinions in the comments below. I love to see it. I can't imagine why people would be so judgmental about Yu-Gi-Oh! Opinions, but you never know. But yeah, thanks for listening to my least hot take. And just remember that it's cheaper to smile than it is to go to therapy. Bye.